Welcome, everyone. I'm so grateful that you have joined us for Death and Taxes, this first part of the series, which is, of course, what is end-of-life care planning anyway? To get started, what I'd like you to do is answer 3 questions for me, each with one word. The first one is, what is your name? The second one is one word, first word that comes to mind when you think about doing taxes. And the third one is, what is the one word that comes to mind, the first one to mind when you think about planning for death? And then once you have gone, call on the next person if you would. So I'll go ahead and go first. My name is Deb, and I'll also add that I'm the End of Life Initiatives Coordinator here at Pima Council on Aging. When I think about taxes, the first word that comes to mind is stress. And when I think about planning for death, the first word that comes to mind is hope. So the next person that I'd like to go is Kimberly.
So my name's Kimberly. When I think about taxes, I think of the word dread. And what was the third one?
What is the one word that comes to mind when you think about planning for death?
Never. I pick Ray.
I didn't hear that very well. Did you say me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first thing I thought of when I thought of taxes was avoidance. And it's a good thing my husband does them. And first thing I thought of with planning for death is relief. And Jen.
Okay, so I'm Jen, and the first thing that comes to my mind with taxes is complicated. And then with planning for death, it was needed. I'll go Victor.
Victor. First word that comes to mind for taxes is Andrea. Lisa knows that one because my wife does our taxes usually. And when I think about planning for death, it's the same thing that Jen thought of, needed. And Cheryl.
I'm Cheryl, and the first thing I thought of with taxes was procrastination. And the first thing I thought of when you said end of life planning is will. I pick Lisa.
I am Lisa. First word that came to mind with taxes was paperwork. Just feels like you're always buried in receipts and paperwork. The first thing I thought of with end of life care planning, kind of opposite of Cheryl, was procrastinate. That's the thing I procrastinate on more than taxes. I'll pass it back to Deb.
Very good. What's really interesting about your responses is that for some of you, the most negative is related to taxes, while for others, the most negative reaction is to that of planning for end of life. So our presentation today is really focused on looking at all of the information that's necessary for successful end of life planning and to hopefully make it much more of a positive way of thinking and communicating and planning for all of us. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead and start our presentation. And all right, very good. Can you all see the screen? Okay, excellent. This presentation has been made possible by the generous donations of our funders, which include the David and Laura Lovell Foundation and the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona. And much of what is contained in this presentation has also been the result of hard work over many years through our partners, the Interfaith Community Services here in Tucson and Thoughtful Life Conversations in the Phoenix area. So the very first thing I want to ask, and please feel free to interact throughout this presentation, is what is end-of-life care planning to begin with? Who has an idea or a suggestion for that?
I'd say it's making arrangements for what you want to happen when you either are physically or mentally unable to do those things for yourself.
That's excellent, Victor. Thank you. Does anyone have something else to add? Okay.
I think it's about education and conversation.
Education, conversation. Anyone else?
For me, it was about formalizing conversations that I'd already had with my family, but having it written so that there's no mystery.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is really kind of a broad spectrum of responses from each of you. And I would submit to you that in many ways, your definition of end-of-life care planning actually identifies some of the values that you have around living, dying, and death. So let's just take a look at this for a second. End-of-life care planning is also known as advanced care planning. And the idea is that these are the decisions we make in advance of an emergency situation around the care that we do and do not wish to receive, and to plan that out by having not only written documents drawn up and executed, meaning that they're legally binding, but also having those necessary conversations with our loved ones and our healthcare providers. So each of you was exactly spot on. So the end-of-life care planning process is usually typified by 5 specific steps. The first one being self-reflection, and that is thinking through your values and having conversations with the people that you love about what those values are. The second part is the legal considerations. This includes not only the financial and the estate documents involved in end-of-life care planning, and that's somewhat outside the scope of the presentation that we're doing today, but also creating those advanced directives. Advanced directives are the legal documents that describe what you do and you do not want in terms of healthcare, and they appoint people who can speak for you if you're unable to speak for yourself. There are also some medical considerations. This is about talking about your plans and your wishes with your healthcare providers, and it involves other documents as well that we'll actually discuss in more detail in other parts of this series. And then, of course, once we've completed advanced directives, how do we store them, and when is it appropriate for us to review them? So let's start with self-reflection. Self-reflection is really the foundation for successful end-of-life care planning. So we're going to talk a little bit about what your priorities are and what your values are. The first question I'd like to ask is, what makes life worth living for you? Take just a moment to think about that. So perhaps what really makes life worth living for you is maintaining a sense of purpose and independence. Maybe it's the relationships that enrich your life with meaning. You may also have a list of things that you want to do, the proverbial bucket list, and those things still need completion. Regardless of how you answer the question, your quality of life is defined by those things that make your life worth living. And thinking about quality of life is imperative as you work through your end-of-life care planning. Is anyone willing to share something that makes life worth living for you?
Like being able to help my family.
Being able to help your family. And so that includes, I imagine, the relationships that you have with them too.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kimberly. So let me ask you the next question. If you were unable to actively engage in those things that make life worth living for you, how would it impact your quality of life? Would you be inclined to develop new interests that make life meaningful? Or would you, in fact, consider life less worth living if you couldn't participate in those things? So let's imagine that question from the perspective of being diagnosed with a chronic or terminal illness. What if the doctors were to tell you that there was little hope for you to participate in those meaningful activities again? Then what? We're not expecting that you will have answers to all of these questions today, but this is the starting point of how to begin the self-reflection. So let's move to the second reflective question. And that is, what is most important to you as you die? Take just a moment to think about that. There's a wise saying, and that is that people tend to die the way that they have lived. And in many ways, this reflects more of our values and our commitments. So your answer to what is most important to you as you die may be somewhat similar to the answer you provided to the question of what makes life most worth living for you. As you think about your last days or weeks or months or even years, what is it that you would want? Would you want to be at home in familiar surroundings, or in a care facility where you know that you have immediate care and assistance if you need it? Would you prefer solitude or quiet, or would you rather be surrounded by all of your loved ones, whether they're humans or pets? And if you had to choose, would you choose freedom from pain over clarity of mind, or clarity of mind with some pain? These are the types of questions to consider as you reflect on your end-of-life wishes. And it's important to remember that these aren't right or wrong answers. It's really about you defining what is quality of life for you as you define it. There are other things to consider as you think about what's important to you as you die. Are there broken relationships that you'd like to repair? Is there forgiveness that you need to offer or ask to receive? With growing clarity about your wishes, do you think then that your loved ones would know what you want if you were no longer able to speak for yourself as of this moment? And if not, how would you feel about them having to wonder or guess or try to figure it out in an emergency situation, should that occur? So here's the third question. How do you wish to be remembered? Now, remembrance can take on two different facets when we're talking about end of life. The first one is like a memorial service. Is there a memorial service that you would like to have held in your honor? And if so, would you like it somber and reflective? Or would you prefer that it is lively and celebratory? Are there spiritual or religious facets that you would like included? Songs you'd like to be sung? Specific people to attend, or others that you wouldn't want to be part of that? Those are parts of the considerations as well. The second part of remembrance, though, is legacy. If I use the word legacy, what do you think that that means?
The lasting impact that you have on the world or on your loved ones, how you remember.
I love that. So often we think of legacy as having some sum of money to bequeath to individuals or to a community activity. But in fact, lasting impact by the investment of our heart, of our spirit, of our efforts, of our hands and our minds, that is imperative as well. So as you think about coming to the end of your days, how would you like to leave a legacy for your loved ones or in the community? All of these are super important to think through, and how we live today is actually part of preparing for how we choose to die. All right. So we asked a moment ago, do you think that your loved ones, whoever your people are, would know what you want in the event of an emergency situation? And many of us would say, yeah, no, probably not. But beginning to think about having conversations with these people that matter is also somewhat overwhelming. So to keep it kind of simple, I want you simply to think about listing the people, first of all, that you trust the most. And do you trust them with different things or with everything in your life? This is an important part of beginning to think through those people who need to know your end of life wishes. Then it is a matter of describing the role or thinking about the role you would like your loved ones to play in your end of life care plan. And third, it's important to identify the most important things you want your friends, family, and healthcare providers to understand about your wishes. This is the foundation of having conversation with those that are your people and who need to know what your end of life care plan involves. Now, let's switch from self-reflection just a little bit to some of the legal considerations of end of life care planning. Now, very briefly, some people ask whether they should have a last will and testament or a living trust. And honestly, the simple factor is two questions. Is your estate, all of your goods, less than or more than $75,000? And if it's less than, a will might work if the people in your life are not likely to be contentious. If your estate is worth more than $75,000 and or the relationships of people in your life are contentious, then a living trust might be better for you. Probate is the process whereby the state gets involved with your estate, and it happens if you have neither a last will and testament or a living trust, or if someone contests your will and or living trust. Now, a financial power of attorney is an imperative person to identify as someone who can manage the affairs of your estate once you are gone or once you're unable to manage those things yourself. This is an important thing, and it's imperative that that person is trustworthy with everything, because that person is someone who needs access to your account information, documents, and passwords. And we'll talk a little bit more about a conservator later. That's a court-appointed person to manage your estate and finances. But what's really crucial is, since all of you are being proactive in thinking through your end of life care plan, know that your banks and utilities may not actually recognize the authority of a financial power of attorney. So work with your financial institutions and your utilities if those details may need to be managed by someone in your future. Now, that was very brief, and it's intentional because most of our focus today is actually on planning for the end of life care. It is never too early to start planning for your end of life. And it's imperative because it's the way to clarify your values and wishes before, remember, in advance of a crisis or an emergency. And it's a way that you can express now what's important to you in the event that you are incapacitated or unable to speak for yourself in the future. It also empowers your loved ones or your healthcare providers to know exactly what you want and how you want it, even if you're not able to describe that for yourself. And that's part of ensuring that you have the honor and the dignity of having your wishes respected. So who needs end of life care planning?
Everyone.
Everyone does, Jen. Thank you. That's right. And Victor said maybe he does too, because he's part of everyone, huh? Absolutely. We at PCOA work predominantly with older adults, but we strongly encourage anyone who's age 18 or older to do end of life care planning. And that's because any of us could be in an accident or come down with a significant illness or be diagnosed with a chronic or terminal illness. If we have learned anything in this past year, it is certainly that with COVID-19. Here's one of the interesting things. Though half of us, 50% of us, will become unable to express our wishes, the legal term for that is incapacitated or incompetent to express our wishes, only 1/3 of us will actually have any type of advanced directive for our end of life health care. That is a sobering truth, and it's something that we have the ability and power to change even today. So let's talk a little bit about some of the medical considerations of end-of-life care planning. Again, you know, those 50% of us, I hope that I'm not one of them, but there's 8 of us on this call. That means that it's likely 4 of us at some point in time will be unable to tell the doctors what we want and what we don't want. And without a legal end-of-life care plan, healthcare providers are obligated both by ethics and by law to provide the most aggressive and life-sustaining treatment possible. This is even if it goes against what your wishes are. And this is the reason why having an end-of-life care plan written down is so important. I actually want you to think about your end-of-life care plan, those advanced directives, as the permission slip for emergency personnel and doctors to do what you want, as opposed to what they are otherwise required to do. Why is it that up to 50% of us could be incapacitated? The possibilities are endless there, right? But some of the things that are important to know is that the types of treatment that are provided, aggressive treatments, include things like CPR or mechanical ventilation or artificial nutrition and hydration. CPR is a great example for us to understand what making those life-sustaining treatment choices really entails. CPR was originally designed in order to save troops on the battlefield. And the reality of it is only 15% of those of us who aren't in combat actually survive or live through CPR. And it only goes up to 20% if you receive CPR in a hospital setting. Whereas those folks who have long-term or terminal illnesses, those who are older and maybe frail or who have chronic medical disease, they have as little as a 1% survival of CPR. And that the flip side of that is, even those that do survive, 50% will have irreversible brain damage, 97% have broken ribs, and 59% have serious bruising to the chest, which can cause secondary issues like blood clots, for example. So when people have the information about some of these aggressive or life-sustaining treatments, it might actually change your perspective on what you do and do not want. So let's talk a little bit about advanced directives themselves. Advanced directive is a term that is used to refer to the 4 primary documents that you fill out and sign in advance of a health emergency. Those 4 include the healthcare power of attorney. The second is a mental health care power of attorney. The third is a living will. And the 4th is the pre-hospital directive. Let's talk just a little bit about each of those 4, because it's very important to identify which of those 4 are right for you. The healthcare power of attorney simply names a person or persons. We have another person joining us. Welcome, we're so glad that you're here. We're talking about advanced directives and the 4 different types. The medical healthcare power of attorney is simply a legal document that authorizes people that you identify to make decisions on your behalf if you are unable to do so. The mental healthcare power of attorney is a little bit different. This is where you again appoint a person or persons to make behavioral or emotional health decisions for you if you're unable to make them. Now you may think, hey, I've never had any issue with behavioral health or emotional kinds of challenges. I'm not going to need one. But aging comes with a number of things that sometimes enter into the mental health care arena. Even something as simple as an infection can cause delirium. Dementias likewise can also create behavioral health concerns that need treatment. And those might include paranoia, hallucinations, or even self-harm. To that end, in our work with older adults, We strongly encourage you to consider the mental health care power of attorney in addition to the medical health care power of attorney. A living will is where you actually identify the different types of treatments that you do want, as well as those that you do not want. And the pre-hospital directive goes by 3 names: the pre-hospital directive, the do not resuscitate, or the orange card. Now, end-of-life care planning language can get really, really complicated. And if you're like me, you think that all of the different terms have different meanings, when in fact, a lot of them are very similar. A power of attorney can also be referred to as an agent, a proxy, or a representative. A living will is, again, those places where you have preferences for your life-sustaining treatment. And we talked already about the pre-hospital directive. Now, a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment is just that. It's a doctor's order. And this is usually for someone who has been diagnosed with a terminal condition. Hospitals and healthcare facilities are required to follow the physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. And they're beneficial if you need one, because they're more easily accessible, at least at this point in time. We talked about incapacity. Again, that's being unable to make decisions for yourself or to express those decisions about the type of care you wish to receive and those that you don't. It can also be called incompetence. And without advanced care directives, pardon me, if you have not identified people to make those decisions for you, what happens is that a surrogate ends up being appointed. And a surrogate's authority is different than a power of attorney. So it's really beneficial to have those proactive steps in place of naming your healthcare and your mental health care powers of attorney. Now, guardianship, conservatorship, those are in the event that you are incapacitated and no one is stepping up to be able to make decisions for you. It actually goes through a court process where a judge appoints someone to make either the medical or the financial decisions. And these tend to be very painful processes that cause tremendous amounts of conflict. And so this is yet one more reason we encourage you to do your end-of-life care plan now. But end-of-life care planning can also think about, what would I like to happen after I die? Would I like to donate tissue, organ, or my whole body to science? And there are benefits that can come for you and your loved ones if you choose to do that. But it also is about thinking through things like cremation or burial, again, religious or spiritual practices, or even considering the environment. There's a growing field of after-death options that are considered green options. So the next part, as Lisa had said at the beginning, is once you begin to think that you are coming to conclusions about what your end-of-life care plan looks like, it's important that you discuss these things with each of your loved ones as well as your healthcare providers. And also then to document what your wishes are and to discuss those wishes and values over and over again. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't change your mind. You can always change your mind with end-of-life wishes. So once you have completed your end-of-life care plan, you've signed them or had them witnessed or notarized, then it's time to know what to do with end-of-life care plan storage. And when I say this, storage is actually the last thing you're going to do. It's much more about disseminating photocopies to people. Remember that an end-of-life care plan photocopy is just as valid as an original. So share copies of that widely. It's not a secret to be locked into a safe deposit box. Ensure that your healthcare powers of attorney actually have copies of your wishes. Make copies for other people who matter to you. Discuss those documents. Get it attached to your medical health record if you're able to do that. Keep copies that can be transported with you to the hospital, and keep the master safe. But remember that the master is simply that by which you're going to continue to make copies if you need them. Then the next part is important that you review your end-of-life care plan. We recommend that you review it for the 6 Ds. That is, each time you reach a new decade of life, Review your plan and make sure it still fits with your wishes. Anytime that you have a friend or a loved one die is a good reminder to take a look at your plan. Certainly, if you experience a divorce or receive a new diagnosis, that's a great time to review. Or if you have a decline in your condition that has you concerned about what the future holds. And the pandemic this last year has reminded us that disasters are a great time to review your end of life care plan as well. My end of life care plan actually needs to be updated because historically I said I didn't want any mechanical ventilation. But the pandemic has suggested to me that under normal circumstances, I may not. But if I have a virus and like COVID-19, I may want to be kept alive, believing that I'll make a recovery in the future. So there's one more thing I'd like you to think about, one more question to reflect on, and that is end-of-life care planning a gift? And if so, or if not, why is that? Share with me your responses.
It is for the loved ones around you, to eliminate the anxiety that they would face in trying to make decisions for you and the stress that they would go through.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Victor. Anyone else?
It's like it's a gift to yourself too, to give yourself the peace of mind that you know your wishes will be honored and that you've done everything you can to take all those steps.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying is providing clarity to loved ones and some degree of confidence and assurity for yourself. Anyone else?
I agree with both of those things. And I think that's where I came up with relief, when you asked for that one word in the beginning, because it does give me that assurance about my own status, but especially knowing that my husband won't have to make those decisions, especially in a time of medical crisis or grief.
Love that. Love that. Thank you all for sharing. As you can see, each of us brings our own perspective on end-of-life care planning with us, and different things are important to different ones of us. At PCOA, our commitment is to support and assist you in thinking through all of these things and making the decisions that are best for you. And that is one way that we can help to ensure that the end of life, the end of your life, receives as much beauty, care, and respect as the beginning.
Hi, come in. I'm just finishing up something, so get started or I'll be back in a minute, okay? Hang on. You're a little early.
Oh, really?
Well, you said between 1 and 1:30, so I figured it'll be 1:30. Doesn't matter. Good afternoon, ladies. Okay, let's see.
Could our attendee mute herself? That would be great. So we are here to help you with any part of this process. And today was really just a review of the end-of-life care planning process as a whole. Over the next 4 weeks, we'll go into greater detail about different facets of this. And I'm so grateful for your willingness to be here with me today. For those of you that may have questions or comments or have additional needs, I'm happy to stay on and to address those with you. But again, thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again next week for Death and Taxes, What are Advanced Directives, and Where do I get them? Thank you so much, and I'll hang on for questions if you have them.
Thank you, Deb.
Thanks, Deb.
Very nice.
Mary Helen, welcome. I'm so glad you were able to join us, and I'm sorry if you had some difficulty logging in today.
I just can't keep going right now. I've got a cleaning team that just arrived early, so I would love to talk to you later. So sorry. I can't even figure out how to turn this off. Oh,
That's okay.
Anyway.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
Will we see you next week?
Yeah, I hope so.
Great, Mary Helen. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh.
Did you do a Zoom call?
Yes.
And I didn't have the mic on. I had the mic on. And when you